All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hope everyone's having a great start to their Thursday. I can't really complain where I'm at. It is sunny and 75, and I've got the pleasure to connect with you all. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is John Diaz. I'm an assistant professor and extension specialist in the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication and an affiliate of the Gulf Coast Research Education Center. Today's in-service training is going to focus on best practices for developing measurable objectives. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as you see in this outline, we're going to cover a lot of different components of developing measurable objectives, starting from what an objective is, where you can get objective information from, and then going into more of the nuts and bolts behind the objectives themselves. So we'll just jump on into it. So what do we mean by objectives? At a basic level, objectives are really clear targets to strive towards. These targets represent the expected results for your program, or in other words, they express what is anticipated as a result of the program. When developing program objectives, it is important to ask yourself, what would you like to see success look like? These targets/objectives help to outline your vision of success, really in a more structured manner. In a general sense, objectives give direction to your program and are oriented around a situation that needs to be changed, improved, or maintained. So those of you all that were part of the needs assessment in-service training yesterday, this may resonate with you coming from that. So when we write objectives, the main emphasis should be its usefulness in guiding teaching and learning process of the program. Generally, educational objectives should state the results or benefits in terms of what will happen to the learners and or participants who complete the program. So typically, agents conduct a needs assessment, which we talked about yesterday, to understand how to best develop their program and associated objectives directly in reference to their target audience. Through this process, the educators are able to gain information from the learners themselves, contemporary life, or society, and the subject discipline experts. So yesterday when we were looking at who to engage in the needs assessment process, this identifies some of those folks that you can engage. So the learners themselves, you can collect data through observations, interviews, questionnaires, and tests to attain information on where they are and where you want them to be from a learning and educational standpoint. You can also make observations of everyday life. This can be just from observations through your work, conducting literature reviews, or just seeing what the situation is around you and making an informed decision that way. And there's also the opportunity to engage with subject specialists. So having conversations with state specialists, other agents, your county director, etc., to understand from them what they feel like the needs are and having their ability to look at the data once you finish your needs assessment. So now that I provided some basic backgrounds on developing objectives, let's dive into the important components of writing objectives. The first being the consideration of Boyle's 3 levels of objectives. Boyle identifies that objectives can be developed at a societal, program, and instructional level. The societal level objectives, they're really typically philosophical in nature and reveal the general goals of society and the organization, as stated of the organization's vision and mission statements. For our purposes, it would be related to extension. So an example of societal level objective is improve economic conditions of the state or county. Program level objectives are characterized by statements about specific situations that are in need of improvement through educational programs. So these are really the overall goal of the programs generally stated. So for example, improvement management of dairy operations. Finally, there are instructional level objectives that are more specific statements that focus on the learner. So for example, 90% of dairy farmers will use computerized records in making decisions on breeding and feeding. You can see that there is a logical causal relationship between these objectives, meaning that if dairy farmers use the computerized records, they will improve the management of their dairy operations that will then improve the economic conditions. So we're going to do a real quick assessment here to figure out if you can identify at what level these different objectives would be. So we'll start with number 1. A program seeks to increase the overall profitability of the county's landscape horticulture industry. So if you will just type into the chat box, if you think A, it's a societal, B, instructional, or C, program level objective. I'll give you all a few minutes. All right, beautiful. So most of you all got it. It was a societal level objective. So I think most of the folks got that. So we'll move on to the next one. If I can get it to work. All right, a program seeks to increase the number of landscape professionals using eye protection in a county. So you identify societal, instructional, or program. All right. I think most of you all got this one as well. There were some folks that identified program, but the correct answer is instructional. So if we look at the previous example, the instructional was using computerized records. So this one is very similar. So this is using eye protection. So you're trying to figure out what are the instructional objectives or the knowledge, attitude, skills, and aspirations that you need to develop to make sure that they're wearing that eye protection. So I think most of you all got that. So we'll do one more. A program seeks to improve the professionalism of the county's landscape horticulture industry. So again, society, program, or instructional. Give folks just a couple more seconds. All right, so I think there was a little bit of confusion with this one. So this one's actually a program level objective. While there is a larger reaching impact with this one, this doesn't necessarily have societal implications like the overall economic profitability of the landscape horticulture industry that extends beyond just those involved in the industry, or has more community level and state level impact. So while this one is very similar to the first one, this one is more siloed to the industry itself, and it's something that would be the ultimate goal of your program. So just to keep that in mind, I know there's very nuanced difference between the first one and this third one, but just take that into consideration when looking at it. I don't think that there'll be much question in regards to your program, because you all understand your programs a lot better than these abstract programs, but just something to keep in mind. So before we move on to the next part of the presentation, does anybody have any quick questions? All right, so I'll take that as no, and I'll just keep on rolling. So we will move into Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. So when you're developing those immediate outcomes and medium objectives as regards to your program, you want to consider the learning objectives within one of the three domains. So there's the cognitive domain that's in relationship to knowledge, the psychomotor domain that's in relationship to skills, and the affective domain that's related to attitude. So we all hear the acronym CASA, and that's where Bloom's taxonomy comes into play. So cognitive, as I mentioned, cognitive behaviors deal with acquisition of facts, knowledge, information, or concepts. Psychomotor behaviors are in the realm of manipulative skill use of mind in combination with motor skills. And affective behaviors have to do with attitudes, value, aesthetics, and aspirations. These are all key considerations into developing your objectives, and just understand what you want your audience to do and figure out which of these domains you need to develop your objectives. So Bloom's taxonomy is focused mainly on the cognitive domain. And the reason this was developed, and this is something that's been utilized in the traditional education realm and is very heavily leveraged within extension as well. The idea is for your participants, you want them to move up the Bloom's taxonomy to get to the point where evaluation, but it gives you an idea of where you want folks to fall within the intensity of your program. So if you have a one-day program, you'd expect to develop objectives on the knowledge and comprehensive rungs of this hierarchy. But if you've got a long series where they're engaged for 10, 12 weeks or even longer, you would want them to be at the higher levels of the hierarchy. So this is just like another layer to consider when developing your instructional objectives. The level of intensity and the level of engagement will dictate at what level you'll utilize. You all should have the PDF of these terms, but there's a lot of different terms that are provided within Bloom's taxonomy to develop objectives that are very specific in nature and are correlated to these different levels. So within knowledge, it's really focused on remembering the learned material and recalling facts. They provide a whole list of different terms to use in writing those objectives. The same comes with comprehension. Grasping the meaning of the learned materials, interpreting, predicting outcome and effects. And that goes all the way to application analysis, where application deals with the ability to use learned materials in a new situation, apply rules, laws, methods, theories. Analysis, breaking down into parts, understanding organization, clarifying and concluding. Synthesizing is the ability to put parts together to form a new whole, unique communication and set up abstract relations. And then evaluation, ability to judge values for purposes based on criteria, support judgment with reason. So as you can see, there's a higher level of cognition associated with each of these levels of the hierarchy, and there are specific terms that are related in developing these objectives. If you did not receive the PDF of these slides that have these terms, just let me know and I can send those back out to you, but I did send them through PDEC yesterday, so if you didn't get them, it was probably because it was sent as part of a blast email. Well, these are just really good terms to utilize so that you know what you're looking for through your objectives and what to measure directly related to these different levels in the Bloom's taxonomy. So we are going to move into checking your knowledge again. So I'm just going to verbatim read out a different type of objective. And then you'll let me know at what level within the Bloom's taxonomy it lies. So the first one is, what type of objective is calculating fertilizer rates? So go through the terms and figure out at what level you believe that that lies within Bloom's taxonomy. Now I'll just repeat it one more time since you guys don't have it. What type of objective is calculating fertilizer rates? So give you guys just a few more seconds. All right, so generally speaking, you all were in the right area of Bloom's taxonomy. The actual answer was analysis. So if you look through the terms, calculating is a way in which to analyze a situation. So you're not actually applying a concept, but you're making analysis based on the data that you've got. They're very closely related. They're right in the same realm of the hierarchy, but there is a slight difference between analysis and application. So we'll move on to the next example. So what type of objective is identifying tree species? So look through the different levels within Bloom's taxonomy and let me know what you think. So again, for those that don't have the PDF, there is knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. All right, we'll give you all about 10 more seconds. All right, so the answer for this one is comprehension. It deals with grasping the meaning of learned materials and making interpretations based on that learning. So because they've learned what different tree species are, they're able to go out to the field and make that identification based on what they've learned. They're not actually applying a concept, so they're not implementing something, so that's what makes it a little bit different than application. Application is the ability to use new materials in a new situation, and then applying different rules and methods. So they're not applying a methodology, but they're able to make sense of what they learned and comprehend it based on making that identification. So the final one is, what type of objectives is listing organic pesticides? So again, your options are knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. All right, I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds. So Francisco, it is what type of objective is listing organic pesticides? All right. So everyone got it. It is knowledge. And so with this one, this really gives you a good idea of how to develop an objective for maybe a one-day or an afternoon workshop, and then what you might look to do as far as your evaluation. So if you are having an organic pesticide workshop, having them list what those organic pesticides are that they learned is a way to test that superficial knowledge. So again, this just gives you a good idea of, based on developing this objective in this way, you understand what to do in regards of measurement and the evaluation component of your workshops. So before we move on to the next component, does anyone have any quick questions? All right, so we'll just plug on along. So now let's get into some more of the nuts and bolts of the characteristics of an effective instructional objective. To be effective, each instructional objective must contain 3 components, which are performance, condition, and criterion. In the following slides, each of these characteristics will be unpacked and explain what it means, and we'll walk through some of the examples that will hopefully provide some clarity. So what is meant by performance, conditions, and criterion? Well, performance deals directly with what the learner will be able to do. In turn, your objectives should explicitly outline what that is. Conditions relates to just that, the condition that is needed for the planned performance and should be apparent within your objective. Finally, there is criterion. This outlines what is acceptable performance by the learner, and your objective should describe how well the learner must perform in order to be considered acceptable. So this slide provides some examples of performance characteristics for your objectives. Each word that is bolded and italicized demonstrates the skill or performance verb that would be included in your objective. So we'll just go through each one of these. The learner will be able to calibrate a pesticide sprayer. The learner will demonstrate how to properly prepare vegetables for freezing. The learner will be able to prepare a financial statement from their farm records. The learner will be able to identify common garden insects and list common measures for each. So you can see with using these different terms, you're able to identify what it is that you actually expect them to do. You see how that ties in with Bloom's taxonomy as well. So one of the things that you want to consider when developing your objectives is the behavior or skill that you're looking at or knowledge base overt or covert? Overt refers to any kind of performance that can be observed. So for example, presentation skills. Covert refers to any performance that cannot be observed directly, performance that is mental, invisible, cognitive, or internal. So for example, critical thinking ability. That's something that you can't necessarily see transparently. So the rule of thumb is whenever the performance stated in an objective is covert, add an indicator that is observable to the objective. So here is an example. The learner will be able to prepare a depreciation schedule. So how will you know the learner is able to prepare the depreciation schedule? Well, you need to include an observable action as part of your objective. So using the sample data, the learner will prepare and submit a depreciation schedule. You can observe and critique the depreciation schedule prepared by the learner, therefore it is observable. So you can see that you're trying to measure the same thing, but just making simple changes to your verbiage. It makes it so that you understand what they need to do to make that action or proficiency observable. So here's just some more examples of overt versus covert behavior. So operate a computer record keeping program. So that's over. You can directly observe that. Discriminate between normal and diseased plant samples. So that's something that's going to happen in someone's own mind. So it would be convert, and you have to add an indicator such as sort samples into 2 piles. Recall the procedure for printing a financial statement from their program records. So that's also covert. You need to add an indicator such as by bringing a copy of financial statement to the next class. And then circle each problem area in a financial statement. Overt, you can actually identify. So through these examples, you can see how to make a covert statement overt. So I'll move into conditions. So let's now understand what that means. And when developing the condition portion of your objective, it is important to consider the following questions. So what will the learner be allowed to use? What will the learner be denied? Under what conditions will you expect the desired performance to occur? And are there any skills that are specifically not trying to develop? Does the objective exclude such skills? So this is really providing context in which you expect the learner to be able to carry out the skill or apply the knowledge that you're instilling within them. And you want to make sure that the situation or conditions that you create are as transferable or appropriate to what they would see within their own context. So this just makes sure that you're orienting yourself and your objective effectively around the situation. So some condition examples. Given a personal computer, a data set, and a financial records package, the learner will be able to generate all reports needed to secure an operational loan for the farm. And then there's no one. The participants who complete at least 10 out of the 15 classes will be able to reduce their excess body weight at least by 5 pounds in 15 weeks. So that second one is a really important one to consider, especially for series classes. You want to make sure that you don't position yourself to be unsuccessful by measuring participants that maybe only completed 1 class. If you're trying to figure out their ability to apply and evaluate, they only completed 1 class, then those folks would not be part of your evaluation of your program because they were not engaged with your program long enough to be able to expect these types of outcomes. So again, you see how condition comes into play in developing these objectives and then understanding who to include in your evaluation and what that evaluation needs to look like. So finally, there is criterion. And when you talk about criterion, it deals with things like speed, accuracy, and quality of performance. This slide provides an excellent example of the criterion characteristic. The criterion is 4% increase in soybean yield. The criterion speaks to the quality of the performance carried out by the participant when adopting the recommended seed rate. This is viewed as an added measure to understand the effectiveness of the program. The farmer may be able to identify that they are implementing the recommended seed rate, but are not identifying the recommended seed rate. The farmer may identify that they are implementing the recommended seed rate, but are not identifying the recommended seed rate. This means that they are either not truthfully identifying, carrying out the practice, or that there is another variable at play that needs exploration, and your program may have the potential to provide a solution once understood. So a lot of folks look at this objective as, well, what happens if they come under 4%? What do you do at that point? Well, at that point, it still is a measure of quality, but you then have the opportunity to do research to find out what confounding factors contributed to that lower than expected outcome. So was it your program, or was it a year where we had unusual weather, and then that impacted where you came in regards to your impact? So again, don't take this as an accountability measure solely. It is an opportunity for you to improve your program and maybe incorporate new aspects to your program based on these confounding factors. And with climate change, we're going to have several confounding factors for those that are involved in horticulture, agriculture, natural resources, etc. So coming to an understanding of what those factors are and integrating that into your educational program can be effective. So the almighty SMART objective structure, and I'm sure you all have heard this before. And so what the SMART structure looks at is making sure that your objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So be specific in terms of target clients and the expected outcomes. So who are your participants and what do you expect to see? State outcomes in a measurable form. So if you're expecting them to be able to identify organic species, explain how many of those participants or what percentage of those participants you expect to see that outcome so you understand where success lies. Your results should be achievable, but they should also be realistic within the available resources. So this is going between feasibility, but also being ambitious as well. You want to make sure that you're striving for something that you feel like you can attain, but is also something that may be pushing the envelope based on what you have available. So it's just counterbalancing those two things. And then should specify the time taken to accomplish the objective. And so this is just meaning when you expect it to happen. So if it's something you expect to see after the workshop, make sure you include that. Or if it's a part of a follow-up evaluation, make sure you identify when you expect to see that specific behavior. So for example, if a crop season has to do with it, make sure that you have that objective in tune with the different crop season. Or if you want them to engage in farmers markets, make sure that it's in tune with when the farmers market season is, and so on and so forth. So for example, at least 50% of soybean farmers who successfully completed this program will use recommended seed rates in this cropping season. So when you write your objectives, specificity is important so that you can measure outcomes. So for looking back at the previous example, you can get an idea of how to develop a survey or observation protocol to understand practice adoption. So at least 50% of soybean farmers who successfully completed this program will use recommended seed rates in this cropping season. Using the example of a survey, you can send up a follow-up survey that asks everyone that completed the program if they used recommended seeding rates. Once you get the surveys back, you can find out what percentage have adopted that practice, thus understanding the effectiveness of the programs. The challenges arise when outcomes like the aforementioned seeding rates are not tangible and difficult to specify. One example is development of leadership. The best way to approach this type of intended outcome is to translate into a variety of specific actions that can be observed or counted. So for example, a development of leadership, an example could be at least 10% of the participants will become officers of local community organizations. So again, this gets at kind of that covert versus overt and giving yourself an opportunity to actually measure what you're looking for within your participants. So while developing your objectives, it is important that you screen or prioritize them based on the organizational mission of Extension. The UF-IFAS Extension Roadmap provides a great resource to ensure that your objectives align with strategic goals of Extension. Aligning your programs with this roadmap is of critical importance as the evaluation of Extension faculty is done in reference to these roadmap initiatives and the super issues Extension seeks to address. Additionally, these objectives should also align with your beliefs and values as an educator. Extension faculty are the experts in their program, and these objectives should represent what you all believe will help to achieve organizational and societal goals. So there's the balance between linking them up to what the organization wants, but utilize your expertise and knowledge as experts, as extension educators in your program area to make that justification and that identification. So in summary, we walk through what objectives are, the different layers of objectives, and the purpose of writing objectives. We discussed Boyle's 3 levels of objectives, which were societal, program, and instructional. We also included and went over Bloom's taxonomy, the characteristics of instructional objectives, and the different components of SMART objectives. So it's important as you're looking at your plan of work to make sure that those objectives are including all these key characteristics so that you make sure you understand what your vision of success for your program is, what you expect from your participants, and how to measure your ability to attain this vision of success so that when you're in that dreaded time of ROA season, you're able to develop a salient narrative based on data of the impacts of your program. So we will go into identifying SMART objectives. So we've got 3 right here, and we'll just start with the first one. And I want you to explain or identify if it's a SMART objective, and if not, why not? So we'll start with the first one. Annually, 75% of youth who participate in the Grow Your Pizza Day Camp will be able to follow recipes. So let me know if this is SMART, and if it's not SMART, why? So Shelley wrote in, how will you measure if they can follow recipes? Yolanda said, not SMART, missing some components. We got a few not SMART. Time component is vague. Yep. Yep. Perfect. So I think you guys covered it. It's not a SMART objective for several different reasons. You know, you really aren't able to measure it because it's more of a covert behavior. You have to provide more information on what they would do. So and when you'd expect for them to do it. So it's kind of like with that depreciation schedule. They'd be able to put it together, but then you'd also have to say, you know, what it would look like in regards to submission, or what the, you know, what quality of the recipe would look like, and so on and so forth. So this one's just not measurable or specific enough, and it does not provide any kind of time frame. So number 2, in 2018, 60% of Canning for Your Life program participants will report applying new preservation techniques as a result of the program, as measured by a 6-month follow-up phone interview. So is this SMART or not SMART? And if it's not SMART, why? Perfect. You guys got it. It is definitely a SMART objective. So it includes all the key components to make it specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So it says, is it attainable? 60% of Canning for Life program report applying new preservation techniques as a result of the program. So, I mean, 60% is, it's really dependent on the program type. And within this one, we've worked with preservation programs, and 60% is attainable. So if you're not attaining that number, just looking at what you're doing and how to have better impact that way, but whether it's longer workshop, a series, etc. But that's really making an informed decision on what that percentage looks like. And with canning workshops, we've seen that 60% works well. All right, so the final one, My Plate for older adults. Field day participants will be able to select high fiber foods from a given set of 5 food labels. So is this SMART or non-SMART? And if it's not SMART, why? Yep. All right, you guys got it. It's definitely not a SMART objective. There's a lot that's wrong with this objective. We don't know how many of the participants we expect to see this, when, and there's just not enough level of specificity within this to understand what we're really looking for them to do. So I think you all touched on different components on it, but you are all right. This is not a SMART objective. All right, here are some more. From 2017 to 2019, 100 individuals will be certified as water quality citizen scientists as measured by the number of certificates issued. So is this SMART, not SMART, and if it's not SMART, why? So Pat asked, is it attainable if you don't have at least 100 participants? So that's a good point, and I think that number was selected based on the number of overall participants that they would see within the program. So there's an opportunity to do a percentage or a number based on your participation. So that 100 number was based on overall participation. I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds. All right, so Yolanda asked what skill. So this is actually not skill related. This is in relationship to getting a certification, which in itself would be one of the longer term impacts, depending on what your program would look like. So this is a SMART objective. We know what the time frame is, how many people, what it is they're doing, and we can measure it because their certificates are issued. The realistic and attainable would be based on the program itself, so that 100 individuals based on your program may change. So that's something to consider, but for our purposes and in understanding this program, it is definitely a SMART objective. So move to number 2. 90% of pest management professionals will improve their skills as measured by instructor observations. So SMART or not SMART, and if not SMART, why? All right, give you guys just a few more seconds. All right, so this is definitely not SMART. Not only is it not specific, it's not measurable or time bound. So I know a lot of folks are asking, what are the skills? That's a Great question. We have absolutely no idea what those skills are. We know it's in relationship to pest management. There's a lot of skills that are related to pest management. So this not only is not measurable because we don't know the skills, but it's not specific enough on the skills. And then there's no time orientation. When are we expecting to see these skills? Are we expecting to see it right after the workshop, a year, 3 years, 100 years? We don't know. So this doesn't give us that time-bound component to it. All right, so the next one, from 2015 to 2019, 100 participants completing Master Gardener training will increase their understanding of coastal systems by at least 10%. So is that smart or not smart, and why? So it's not 100% Marguerite, it's 100 participants. All right, so you guys are right. This is definitely not a SMART objective. We do have a time frame, which is from 2015 to 2019, but it's not specific and measurable. It will increase their understanding of coastal systems could not be any more vague if we tried to make it any more vague. There's so many different things in regards to coastal systems, so what are we measuring in regards to that? So that's very vague. We want to make sure that we're a little bit more specific on what that expectation is. And there's still an opportunity to be higher level in regards to the knowledge or skills that we're looking at still, but still be specific so it's not quite as vague as just general understanding, because that just doesn't give you any information to help make a measurement, and that's really important in developing these SMART objectives. So here we've got one last objective, and I want you guys to think if it's SMART or not, and what you all would do if it's not SMART to make the improvement. And so just type that into the box and explain what you would do to help make it more of a SMART objective. Beautiful. So Julie says, also a measure of what makes a business plan acceptable. Beautiful. That's a good one. And time frame is definitely important. Yep, time frame for sure. So one of the things I want you all to consider is, do you think this is also achievable? So Pat's also asking about quality measurement. So that's something for you to decide. You can integrate that into your objective. The problem when you look at quality in regards to an objective is that'll make that objective somewhat lengthy. So just make sure that you frame it in a way that doesn't make your objective turn from a sentence to a whole paragraph. Okay. So I'll give you, you guys provided some excellent examples and ways in which to move this to more of a SMART objective. So I'll give you one example to leave you with to help to move this to more of a SMART objective that is specific, measurable, realistic, attainable, and time-bound. So within 3 months, 50% of extension clients participating in the Homegrown Entrepreneur Series will submit business plans to the Community Development Agent for feedback as measured by the number of plans submitted. So you see how that integrates all of the different components, makes it a overt behavior because they're actually submitting it to someone. It gives you exactly an idea of what they're doing, a time frame, etc. So you get an idea of how to move this objective to the objective that is more SMART. All right, so that wraps up things for today. I definitely appreciate everyone's participation in today's in-service training on developing measurable objectives. Before we log off, I want to take the time to address any questions. So if anyone has any questions, please, if you could type those into the chat box. And while folks are typing those into the chat box, I'll just let you all know that I have this video recorded. I'll be uploading it to YouTube and sending it to you all. So if you want a refresher, you guys can do that. And I'll also be sending the PDF for those of you that did not get it. And then if you guys have some time, if you would please complete the evaluation on this in-service training. I just want to make sure that you guys got out of it what you were looking for, and I can continue to improve these offerings. And then after the fact, if you have any questions or need help, my support in any way, my email and phone number are on here. So. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. If a single module lesson is being taught, is it possible to move beyond knowledge or comprehension? So I think that really depends on your audience. If you've got an audience that's more on the advanced side of things, then you can make that expectation. But if you have an introductory workshop with folks like, so for example, if it's folks that have absolutely no idea what they're doing with integrated pest management or gardening or anything else, it's really an unrealistic expectation for them to go from not knowing it to being able to evaluate and apply it. So it's just being realistic with yourself and making sure that you don't put yourself in a place where you're constantly behind the 8 ball and showing that you're not successful. Where do you find the IFAS roadmap? So if you just Google UF IFAS extension roadmap, you'll have absolutely no problem finding it. So here you go. While I was on here, I was able to find the link for it. So it gives you the roadmap, an executive summary, and the initiative teams and priority work groups webpage. Is it possible to measure the one-on-one consultation or phone calls? How can we do that? So for those of you that are still on, Dr. Laura Warner with the Center for Landscape Conservation and Ecology actually has an individual contact teaching tool that helps to measure one-on-one consultations, everything from phone calls, emails, site visits, etc. If you all are interested, there's a link to that and a how-to guide that shows you how to use it. And essentially what it is someone submits a request, you go out to their place, do whatever it is, consultation, whether it's in person, email, etc. And then you go in and enter it into the system explaining what that recommendation is. And then it automatically will spit out to them a survey that asks them if they were satisfied with the engagement, if they learned, and if they are likely to implement the recommendation. We are working on a follow-up survey to that to actually measure behavior change, but Dr. Warner is actually on maternity leave, so that has been put on the back burner for right now. All right, do we have any other questions before we hop off? Can I send you a link to this resource? Yes, I can definitely send that to you. So I'll make note of it and I'll send it with the PDF, the YouTube link, and everything else. All right, well, I definitely thank everyone for participating in this in-service training. And as I mentioned, my contact information is here on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here to support you all in your program development and evaluation efforts, and would love to work with any and all of you all. So have a wonderful afternoon, and enjoy this beautiful Florida weather we're having.